Hi, welcome back to Water Matters podcast. I'm your host for today, Noonie, and today I'm joined by Danielle. Danielle, introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm a scientist at GRAF and I specialise in biological wastewater treatment systems and nutrient removal.
So today we'll be talking about biological wastewater treatment, what's actually in wastewater, and all the different bacteria that are involved in that process. So Danielle, in real simple terms for our listeners and watchers today, what really is happening when wastewater gets cleaned?
So bacteria are already present in the wastewater and the system is just designed to give them the right conditions to clean the water before it's discharged. So the core idea is that the biology does the work and the system's designed to create the right environment for them.
So what are the sort of key misconceptions around sort of the terminology wastewater treatment?
Probably that it's mainly a chemical or mechanical process, but in reality it's almost entirely a biological process, so the bacteria are doing the work.
So how reliable is that as a sort of solution, if you're not relying on any sort of chemical or mechanical components?
Well, the bacterial population are quite resilient and self-organising. Even after serious disruption they can rebalance themselves given the right conditions.
So for listeners then who have never really thought about it, what's in this wastewater?
So it's a mix of everyday waste like food waste, soaps, detergents, anything that goes down the drain. Also two key nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, and then billions of bacteria who actually help treat the water.
So a lot of us, would just assume this is, dirty water. So if it is treated, then, sort of what harms are we looking at when we're discharging this into different water courses?
So two problems really. One being the breakdown of the waste and two being excess nutrients in the receiving waters. So when the waste is broken down, it uses up oxygen in the surrounding water, so you get areas of water that have oxygen depletion. Secondly, the excess nutrients cause algal blooms in the water. These can block sunlight to anything below, and also when they're broken down also depletes the oxygen in the surrounding water and leaves areas of water where fish and other aquatic life can't survive.
So with such a mixture of things to treat, talk us through how you even begin sort of breaking down or treating a wastewater volume like that.
So the bacteria present in the wastewater already are what treats it. Given the right conditions, they break down the waste and remove the nutrients.
Okay, so we're doing a lot of talking about the bacteria in here, so let's get a little bit more into the biology or your area of expertise on that. What are the bacteria actually doing during this process?
So the waste in the system is their food source. They use it for energy to reproduce and survive. There are multiple types of bacteria in the system. You have a group called flock-forming bacteria who clump together and create flocks that settle to the bottom of the tank. These are really important because they leave the clean water at the top to be discharged. You also have filamentous bacteria. They have a little bit of a bad rep because if they grow out of control then they can actually be detrimental to the flock structure and settlement. But in a good level they are actually really helpful with flock structure. And then you also have other bacteria that specialise in nitrogen removal and phosphorus accumulation. But the important thing is that there's loads of different groups and they all do different jobs and you have to have them all in there to get a healthy system.
Yeah, so what creates that for them? What do they need from the system to be able to do that job? We hear a lot about oxygen, is it as important as we think it perhaps is?
Yeah, so the main things that they need are food, which they get from the wastewater. They need the correct oxygen levels to do their job, and they also need no toxic inputs going into the system. Oxygen is especially important because too little oxygen will slow the bacteria down and you won't get as efficient treatment. Too much oxygen, it will waste energy and it can also affect other parts of the process that need low oxygen conditions.
So we've got all these different types of bacteria in the system, and for anyone assuming that they just get flushed out of the system, that's not actually what happens, right?
No, the bacteria will settle to the bottom of the system and are reused cycle after cycle. They're not replaced every time.
So are we just dealing with bacteria here, or what other sort of microorganisms are we dealing with here?
There are more than just bacteria in there. There are also other organisms, some of which feed on bacteria. This might sound counterproductive, but it actually is healthy for the bacterial population. It keeps them active, keeps them healthy. So you get this sort of mini food chain happening inside of the system.
Okay, so we've got quite a lot going on inside the system. So how do you tell if that's all working correctly, if your sort of little food chains are all working in conjunction, or if something's amiss? What's your sort of tell for that process being successful or unsuccessful?
So we're not routinely looking at what bacteria are in the system or what microorganisms are there. We're more looking for the physical signs, so sludge settlement, oxygen levels, and effluent quality, that sort of thing.
So then, does that change if you were to change your influent? So if you had a sudden spike, or if, as an example then, my treatment plant is usually just serving the two of us, and then I had a big party at the weekend, I've got loads of people in, how does that affect the internal workings and the sort of system we've got going on there?
Yeah, so food availability will affect the whole bacterial population. So if you have plenty of food, the bacteria will keep growing. If you don't have enough food, they will eventually start to decline. In systems where the usage suddenly changes, the bacteria will eventually adjust to that, but it will just take a little bit of time.
So it's quite robust, really, the way it's sort of bounce back ability is able to sort of cope with sort of peaks and drops in demand.
Yeah, exactly.
So then with that sort of resilient bacteria that we're discussing, and obviously we touched on earlier the fact that actually stays within the treatment system, it's not something that's discharged all the time. Does that then kind of mean the longer you leave a system running, it tends to perform better? Does it sort of, like a fine wine, get better with age?
Yeah, exactly. So a well-established system, it generally has a bacterial population that's more resilient and effective at treatment. The system is designed to support those exact bacteria that remove nutrients and settle to the bottom of the tank and break down waste, like we spoke about. So over time, the poorly suited bacteria will gradually get outcompeted and get washed out of the system, and those bacteria that are useful for treatment will be thriving and stay in the system.
Great, so it's an ideal system, really, and no chemical or mechanical components.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Danielle, so if someone remembers just one thing from this podcast episode, what should it be?
I think the main thing to remember is that this is a biological process, not a mechanical one. The bacteria are doing all of the work, and the system's designed around them to support them to do those jobs.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for today, Danielle. Thank you for being with us, for sharing your knowledge with us. We've got you again in 2 weeks' time for part 2 of our biological wastewater treatment process podcast. So thank you to everyone for watching or listening today. I've been Noonie, your host. Please do like and subscribe if you've enjoyed our podcast today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for part 2.